this is working. Oh, I don't have my chat box open. That would be a problem. Hello, everyone. And welcome to Podcraft episode 2. We are back.
Yay!
We are doing it again.
Consistency.
Huzzah. Alright. Just give me 1 second. Okay. All right. We are ready to go. Let me just put that there. Oh, that's going to be on there. All right. Anyway, welcome to Podcraft episode 2 again. Today we are playing Minecraft and talking about hydroponics, amongst other things. My main goal is I want to build a tractor or a combine or whatever next to some kind of plotted farming kind of area. So the raiders are scoping nearby. Great. So you know more about what we're talking about, so whenever you're ready we can start chatting.
All right. So
what is hydroponics?
Before we get into that, we kind of have to start with the beginning of what do you know about agriculture? Like, how do we grow food? How do we feed our people? So do you know anything about? It's kind of funny because we're talking about this as I'm in the barn, feeding chickens and
as we're farming.
Yeah, so like, what do you know anything about, farming and agriculture and how to grow crops, stuff like that?
A little bit. Not like I'm not like super experienced in that realm of things.
Not on an industrial level?
No, not on an industrial level. Like, I've been to some farms. I've been to like a dairy farm. My mom lives in Nebraska now, and her husband's a farmer. He mostly, they've got a farm and stuff. So
what do they farm?
So he's working. They mostly do corn. A lot of them do corn in Nebraska.
Right.
And they also do. They have a dry farm that they own. So it doesn't have any irrigation or anything. It's just it relies on rainwater to water the crops.
That's pretty common out there.
Yeah. And so I think for that farm, it's mostly alfalfa growing. They do grow some corn on that farm, but it has to be the right season and stuff. And I do know like they have cows and things for it. So I do know like when you harvest, like a lot of them leave the excess dropped corn or the husks and things, the stalks behind, so the cows come through and then they kind of like recycle the ground so that it makes it towards good for the harvest next year and things like that.
Okay, so this is actually a really good baseline for us to work with.
Yeah.
So a lot of what you've said is absolutely right. So I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up helping out on farms a lot. Um, so I'm kind of lucky in that I've gotten to grow up learning about how does agriculture work,
Right.
especially within the United States and like major like industrial type farming.
Right.
So
Hi, Lindsay.
let's talk about the basics of U.S. agriculture. In the Midwest, you have kind of like what are called like the main, I guess, the main crops. And so you're going to see a lot of wheat, you're going to see a lot of corn, you're going to see a lot of soybeans, and stuff like alfalfa too. But wheat, corn, and soybeans are kind of like the big, almost like the holy trinity of Midwestern agriculture.
Okay.
Um, Now, have you ever heard of crop cycling?
Yes. The concept of
Okay.
growing a different crop in the same place every season. Is
Yeah.
that what it
So
is?
yeah, it's changing what you're growing in different locations. So let's say, okay, so to begin with, there are the three main macronutrients needed for agriculture. The three main, one sec. The three main macronutrients that you need for really good growing, like for plants, is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Yeah.
Um,
Which typically comes from the ground.
Yeah, and those are all they're considered macronutrients because those are what is really required to get a good crop yield. And there's actually a law of agricultural science that states that crop yield, so the amount of crops you will get, is not based on how much nutrients you have, but it's all based on the limiting nutrients. So if you don't have a whole lot of nitrogen, then your crop yield is going to be limited because the nitrogen is the limiting factor. It needs the right balance of all of those things.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the Midwest, especially in Iowa, you see a lot of farmers do a corn and soybean rotation. So, it's a
Okay.
5 year cycle. And for 4 years, the farmer will alternate corns, the next year beans, corn, soybean, like so corn, soybeans, and then they let the field rest for a year.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. The reason you do that is because of that law of limiting um, limiting nutrients. The you're making a literal tractor or combine.
Yeah, that's what I said, didn't I?
I thought it was part of the update. I was like, I don't know what he's talking about, but
Oh,
cool.
I'm gonna build one.
Anyway, uh, corn uses a lot of nitrogen, so it pulls a lot of nitrogen from the ground.
Okay.
So what a farmer can do is instead of spending a whole lot of money trying to put in like the right amount of manure or the right mineral percentages, like the right amount of nitrogen to keep his crops going, he can just switch the next year to soybeans because soybeans actually deposits a fair amount of nitrogens into the soil.
Hmm.
And so they kind of feed each other. Now, that itself can get complex, and if we have any agricultural scientists that are going to be watching this, and boy, I sure hope we don't, there might be some arguments in the chat, and that's to be expected, right? We're going surface level
Right.
agriculture. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty.
Right.
Um,
I mean, I did take a cereal science class when I was in college.
okay. Is that how Kellogg's makes what they make?
No, see, that's what you would think it is, but it's actually more about the anatomy of the main crops that we grow. So, like corn, wheat, barley. Like, so we would study how the like the germs and everything, how it's the what do you call it, the anatomy of it is, and then we would talk about like the process of like how they cross mutate to create different types of wheat, and they create different types of corn and those sorts of things. So
Yeah,
it was a really interesting class. It was a science requirement that I had to do. So,
that's way cool.
but that was a few years ago.
It's been a hot minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about how, like, what does it take to have good crops a little bit. So
Right.
you have to have good soil. You have to have the right amount of macronutrients, and there's some micronutrients you need as well, but generally those aren't the biggest problem when you're planting. The biggest problem is making sure you have the right macronutrients.
Right.
Now, with that, there's this idea that you don't need dirt to grow plants.
Okay.
And that's where hydroponics comes in. So hydroponics is the idea of using just liquids to grow crops, because if we know, the main thing that crops need is not dirt, but it's what's in the dirt, the nitrogen, phosphates, and potassium.
Right.
Well, then if you were to just create a mineral water solution that has those things, then you can keep plants going.
Without
and you've seen
the
this
dirt. So
without the dirt.
So when you brought this up, I actually looked up a thing. It's like a video of like how to start a hydroponic garden, and it was pretty interesting, like the different styles and things that people do, like taking large PVC pipes and putting in a little like cage to hold the plant, and then fill it with water, and it has like a nutrient filter and all these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I mean, and you can go really simple with this, or you can go really complex. I think the simplest thing that I saw was a fish tank at Home Depot, and it was like a $20-$30 fish tank where you can grow herbs on the top, and then in the bottom you put like little betta fish or goldfish or whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's like a really cool science experiment, especially if you have small kids, because it's pretty self-contained. There's not a whole lot you have to do with it, especially because some of the best fertilizers for hydroponics, some of the best ways to keep your crops going is to be using certain types of manure. So fish manure and duck manure are two of the best things that you can use to fertilize your plants if you do like a hydroponic system. So to create just like a fish tank
Right.
that, the fish can nibble off part of the roots of the plants, and then their excrement provides the necessary macronutrients for your, basil or oregano, whatever you want to grow. And so it creates this little, habitat.
Right.
Really good, experiment, especially you got small kids. I know with you, with with Henry, like that could be something really cool you could do to help him understand. Well, he's still a little young for it to actually make sense, but
yeah, but he might pick up on
it. So that's a really cool setup. As to the more complex systems, like you'd seen, of creating PVC systems that create the right nutrient flow, and it even going to like a commercial scale, and you have just warehouses full of crops being grown. Like you can get really big and get really complex, and you can grow some pretty complex stuff. Now it's actually really interesting because one of the other things is hydroponics is used a lot for the growing of marijuana.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can easily grow marijuana plants using hydroponics. And it's kind of become a little bit of a problem because,
It's so easy to do.
all of a sudden you don't have to have massive weed farms. Literally all you need is, a quick Wikipedia search, go get what the materials you need, and it's very mundane stuff from Home Depot, and then you can start doing a large scale marijuana operation in your own home. Obviously, I don't recommend that. Like, I don't think that's a good idea.
Right.
Um,
We're not endorsing marijuana growing.
no, I'm not endorsing the home distribution of marijuana. Um, but that actually has been something that they've been seeing is this problem of homegrown marijuana using hydroponics. Now, I guess one of the questions that we could ask is why use okay, we're good. Almost fell into a giant pit. Um, Big question could be why use hydroponics?
Right.
What is the purpose of it?
Yeah.
Um, well, hydroponics is actually incredibly efficient when it comes to water use. The water consumption that the world is currently using is not sustainable. You know, we talk a lot about like
Well,
renewable
and
energy and those types of
when you
things.
water crops, I mean, there's no getting it back, right? Like when you water a crop in the dirt, the water goes into the earth, right? I mean, unless you have some kind of a system that you're sucking the water out of your land, you're
Yeah, and depending on where you are, you can easily do that. So, like in the Midwest, especially like Iowa has really high water tables, so you actually can create pumping systems so that way you can irrigate from a really high water table. Um, Utah is a little bit unique in that it's so dry that you actually have fights over water rights. That was completely alien to me when I moved here, because in the Midwest, it's like no, like everyone has sump pumps to try and get rid of the water. There's too much water.
right.
In fact, that's a huge problem some years of your crops get drowned, like it's not dry enough for a good yield.
Makes sense.
Um, so yeah, water consumption is actually a huge deal. So if we look at what it takes to grow a kilogram of tomatoes, if you use traditional methods and you have like your fertilizers and all that stuff and it's in your own yard, on average, 1 kilogram of tomatoes requires about 400 liters of water.
Okay.
Now, that being said, they are a very like juicy fruit. They have a lot
They're
of
very water
liquid
based.
to them.
Right.
So, but comparing, tomatoes to tomatoes, the same kilogram of tomatoes can be produced with only 40 liters using hydroponics.
Hmm.
Sorry. 70 liters. So it's 400 liters using traditional methods, 70 liters using hydroponics.
So significant either way.
Yeah, it's very significant. And the coolest thing is that there's actually another form of agriculture called aeroponics, and that only uses 20 liters of water to create a kilogram of tomatoes. It's hyper efficient. Now, aeroponics isn't really used a whole lot. It's one of like a cool novelty thing that NASA uses a lot with like the space station and stuff to show that they can grow crops in space, and it requires using like a mineral water mist within a pressurized system to constantly be like giving nutrients to the plants.
Hmm.
That's a little bit beyond what we're talking about
Right.
because we had talked about like why are we talking about hydroponics? Oh, by the way, if you need food, sorry, tangential like non sequitur, where are you?
I am inside of my tractor.
Okay. Outside the barn, there's a small half chest on the left of all the furnaces, and
Okay.
that has a bunch of cooked food.
Oh, nice. Sounds great.
Um,
I don't eat it yet. I've got some bread still, so.
okay.
Although I do need 1, 2, 3 more pieces of black wool, maybe more. So if you see any squids when you're running around, slay them.
You need black wool?
I've used up all the black wool that we had.
Give me a sec.
I might have made this tractor too big.
That's a pretty big tractor that you're making over there, but
I think I need to shrink it a little bit.
Anyway, so why are we talking about this type of stuff? Well, we've been talking a little bit like last time we talked a lot about, staying safe and like the idea of post-apocalypse and how do you grow, like we talked a little bit about growing like growing your own crops and stuff. And
Yeah.
that's where this comes into play is you can grow your own crops. Like I don't need to have a giant backyard to grow
Yeah.
my own fruits and veggies.
Right. Now, my question is there like certain types of things that you can't grow with hydroponics?
Um,
Or it just kind of depends?
that's a good question. To my understanding, it's pretty much the sky's the limit. If you can create the base needed to really keep your infrastructure going,
Yeah.
you can grow anything. Now, that being said, hydrophilic plants, so plants that like lots of water, are way more popular than I just sheared all of them. None of
Okay.
the black ones are ready.
So like when you say that, you mean like stuff like lettuce
So
or
lettuce, tomatoes, cabbage, those types of things are
watermelon?
really.
Could you do watermelon, do you think?
You can do watermelon with hydroponics, yeah.
Hmm. That'd be
Um,
interesting.
yeah, like I mean, it's really cool if you go like if you look at especially like Asian markets, you have the specialty watermelons that are made through hydroponics, and they're also square.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they were genetically they're modified.
I mean,
I
like
don't know if they were genetically modified
Minecraft
to have a square
watermelons,
shape or if it's just that they grow them in a mold.
where
But
they.
it's for distribution purposes. Because space is so like the demand for space within distribution is so high and is so needed. Um, a very smart distribution and farmer guy decided, hey, if we make our watermelon square, we can almost double
How much you
um,
can distribute?
our distribution.
That makes sense. Because, so I used to work at a grocery store in produce, and pumpkins and watermelons always come in these gigantic boxes, like all together, right? With on a singular pallet, and they usually stack them. And like I would say, the box can probably hold, I don't know, 75 to 100 maybe. But there's so much empty space in the box because the fruit is all round or oval.
Right. There's a whole lot of negative space, and that's
Right.
kind of a problem, especially if you're trying to ship. So by doing this, they maximize how much material they're able to move with square watermelons, as well as maximize um, what was I going to say? They can maximize the distribution as well by having square watermelon.
Right.
Um, so I mean, it's really interesting stuff when it comes to hydroponics, like what you can do, what you can't do. For the most part, I didn't see anything when I was prepping for this topic. I didn't see anything like big agriculture things of like corn or soybeans. But the other interesting thing, I mean, another thing you have to realize is those are big bumper crops for U.S. markets. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
the U.S. I think we export something around 80% of the corn that we produce.
Really?
We make that much corn.
Especially
Like
because, and that's also kind of surprising because, like, so many cows, like meat cows and things, are fed corn.
right. Well, and that's the other thing is it's important to note when we're talking about this that there are two main there's two different types of corn. Um, so there is what's called dent corn, which is corn that is not fit for human consumption.
Right.
And dent corn makes up about, I think it's like 85 or 90% of all corn that is produced.
Really? That's a.
Yeah, dent corn is highly used. And the reason is because, like, you're absolutely right. It's the need for, like, it's our animals, but it's also used in big industrial projects
Yeah.
like dent corn it provides ridiculous amounts of what we need in our day-to-day consumption. And then sweet corn is the corn that, we eat corn on the cob, and that's all sweet corn, and that makes up the rest of the rest of, the production.
Right.
So, but like if you look at globally how much rice
Oh yeah.
is like made and how much rice is needed,
Oh yeah.
it's pretty impressive. And so rice is also one of those things where you have to have a lot
Oh.
of
Oh yeah. Lots of land
water.
and water. I mean, it grows in the water basically,
Right. And
and you
so
have to keep it wet
rice
forever.
is something that you can produce with hydroponics. There was a really cool um NASA had a competition. So we're going to be a little bit tangential again, but we're going to talk about space for a bit because that's kind of like
Space.
a big part of hydroponics. Like, why do we need hydroponics? Well, for starters, more and more on Earth where we have finite space, we have finite places that we can put things. We have, you know, we have needs to meet, and the world isn't getting smaller, there's just getting more of us in it.
Right.
So how do we meet those needs? Well, growing crops using small amounts of water to maximize yield is actually a really good way for us to do that. um, so let's look at one thing that NASA has been looking at doing. So NASA um,
Which
has been looking at
everyone knows
replacing,
NASA,
right,
right?
space agency for the United States.
Space program.
Um, NASA's been wanting to get back to the moon and get to Mars. They want to start doing colonization missions, which I think is awesome.
Right.
Um, Now, from what I understand, NASA was working on what was called Project Constellation. Project Constellation was this plan to. Okay, I've got a really sad puppy. Give me 1 second.
Puppy. The poor puppy. Almost got all the right stuff. What else could I use that would look good? Use this diorite? Yeah, worth a shot. Digging.
All right, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Okay, so NASA wants to go back to the moon and wants to do Mars. Like, it wants to do all this cool stuff. And here's what I love about NASA is that so many of the technologies that have improved our lives dramatically, like the quality of life in the United States,
Yeah,
were designed by NASA. NASA designed the ballpoint pen.
it's true.
And I'm okay.
Sorry,
I'll
I'm
come back.
outside. I know you're underground.
Yeah. NASA designed the ballpoint pen. NASA designed the microwave oven.
True.
And so a lot of technologies that have greatly benefited just common everyday life in the world were things that were designed by NASA because it makes sense. NASA has to design
They have to
things
think
to keep
about
people alive.
things in a way that most people wouldn't think about because when it has to work in space with no gravity, you have to kind of
Right,
think
in the
differently.
harshest of conditions.
Right.
So, I mean, I love it. It's awesome. So they wanted to do what was called Project Constellation, which was this colonization thing. And so they had this project where they wanted people to try and design perfect biospheres,
Okay.
completely self-sufficient.
Interesting.
Which, right, like how do we that's a new avenue of science. We haven't really, up until then, there hadn't really been, like, everybody had thought about like how do you do self-sufficiency, but the idea for a long time has always been, oh, we always have enough. And
Right.
as our population continues to bloom throughout the globe, that is turning more and more into a false statement. We don't
And
always
eventually it
have
will be.
enough.
Eventually there won't be enough.
Right.
Because we
So
typically consume more than we produce.
we have been. In fact, there's a speculation that our grandchildren will not have beef as a regular part of their diet because beef costs so much to produce. And that goes back to water, of the amount. I think a pound of beef requires 1,800 liters or 1,800 gallons
Right.
to produce. It's ridiculous, especially if you compare it to other meat sources. So it's not that, everyone's going to be, our grandkids are going to be vegan, but,
They're just going to be eating chicken.
yeah, they're going to be eating chicken. They're going to be eating quail, actually, is a big thing that's kind of been booming. And it's kind of like it's a little bit of like a hipster thing right now,
Go
but
fad.
maybe. And I kind of hope it isn't a fad, because quail is actually a really cool production concept, because it is a lot cheaper to produce than chickens. It's a lot easier to produce in small scale manufacturing. So like you and I could have quail coops
Right.
in our yards. It doesn't smell as bad. Like, it's just, quails is something that is actually way cool to consider.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Oh,
what the heck just happened?
I don't know. The realm disappeared. Hold up.
So
Must have found a landmine.
some students at Berkeley came up with an almost 100% efficient biodome.
Okay. We're going to count to 10 and then try again.
Yeah, it's saying it can't connect me. It's kind of weird. Um, they used a mixture of seaweed and eels to create this perfect harmony of consumable foods for humans, um, and also doing oxygen production. So basically, you can scale the bio components
Mm-hmm.
based on how many humans you want to sustain.
Okay.
Now, that being said, it kind of sucks because like your diet would mainly consist of eels and seaweed,
Seaweed.
and that's, how much weird sushi are you going to be able to eat?
Yeah, that's
Um,
a good point. How much seaweed can you handle? Oh,
right. I just restarted Minecraft.
did it work?
Oh, I'm restarting it now. Um, anyway, so that's been really cool to see, because it's a hydroponics based system, because it's a lot of it's like water based. But
Right.
I'm really excited, especially with like SpaceX pushing to try and have a manned mission in the next 5 years to the moon or to Mars. Like, I'm really excited to see that side of our development, because I believe in the space, what happened with the space race is that the common man is going to benefit from the next space push, because what are we looking at right now? We're looking at dwindling resources. We're looking at, this lack of renewability and, this idea we're not living sustainable lives.
Yeah.
Well, nothing is going to push us. Like, there is no need to drive our instinctual needs to change, right? Like, we develop the most when there is a need to develop.
Huh. Interesting.
Like, and that's just how animals work, is like when there is an impulse, we adapt. Well, there is no impulse for us to need to change. I feel no need to change, my liking of, it's still not connecting to the realm.
Yeah, I'm trying to look and see if anyone's online saying anything. 40 minutes ago, people said Bedrock realms are down for maintenance, which is what we're playing on. But that was 40 minutes ago. It didn't post anything saying that it was, but maybe it's gonna die today.
Mm.
My chair's all squeaky today.
But yeah, like, you don't feel an impulse to change. I love burgers. I like beef.
Right.
Do I understand consciously? Yeah, I should limit my, like, every pound of beef that I have is ridiculous amounts of resources being consumed. Yes. But does it drive me to change my behavior?
Right.
No. But you know what would, if I had the opportunity to go live on Mars, because I do have that drive of wanting to go explore and go travel to another planet.
Right.
And all of a sudden, that is a motivation, because that is something tangible that can drive my psyche of, like, I can't eat beef because, and then I can't drink. I don't have water for anything else. Which means I won't have air for anything else. So, yeah, like, I mean, we started with this, and I think anybody who's listening to this, like, yeah, I'm going to be starting doing some hydroponics in the next little bit, because I got people that want to grow stuff in my house. And instead of, like, tearing up part of the backyard or something to try and create flower beds, I really want to try and do something. We have a garage that's mainly used for woodworking projects and stuff like that. We could easily start growing our own produce in our garage. For very little cost. And I would encourage anybody else, like, yeah, look into this. It's way cool. Self-sustainability is something that we're kind of needing to start looking at in multiple ways. I think that the COVID-19 concern, like the public health concerns, is bringing some of this to the forefront of, like, people realizing what were to happen if the power goes out. And we've seen that a little bit in Utah, where, especially after the earthquake that we had a couple weeks ago, all of a sudden everybody's buying water and everybody's buying power generators. They're dropping $700 on a generator they don't know how to use because they experienced a power outage and they realized, oh shoot, my fridge isn't working.
Yeah. And now they have to boil their water in that area because they found a dead raccoon in the sewers or in the water source.
In Springville, they had the same problem where people were throwing golf balls into the water source and it completely screwed up pipes.
Really?
Yep.
Why would they? People are dumb, man. People sometimes are the worst.
So, yeah, like, it's way cool to look at self-sustainability and to look at, like, how can we be better people? How can we change things? Because, like, I don't have kids, but you have kids, and for better or for worse, like, I'm kind of like an uncle to a lot of kids. Like, I'm kind of like an uncle to your kids. I'm definitely, like, my best friend and his wife who live here. Like, as much as my dog looks at them as being just part of the pack, I'm the godparent to their kid. And I actually am a literal uncle. I have a little nephew. And it's kind of opened my eyes to, like, what are we doing That's like, what are the lasting effects of our decisions? Because that's definitely something that is different with upcoming generations when it comes to resource management.
Right.
Obviously, the people before us had the same thought of looking ahead to the future with like the way that the Cold War operated, and you know, even like the space race, there was this idea of using technology to beat the Russians, but then also creating this awesome, cool future. And I mean, I think it was since Kennedy until 3 years ago, the number one profession that was desired by middle school children was astronaut.
Yeah. That doesn't
Like,
surprise me.
that left such a lasting legacy.
Let me know when the realms loads again. Did it work for you, realms?
No.
Okay. I just opened up Ylands cause and I'm sitting here eating corn. Just eating corn because it's on point.
Unable to connect to world.
Yeah, that's not. Oh. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like, we've really seen a lot. Like, everyone at one point in time when they were a kid was like, "Oh, I want to be an astronaut because that sounds like fun." It's scary and terrifying, and I don't think it actually is as fun as it looks. But it doesn't stop people from wanting to kind of feel like that could be something they could do someday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, and you know, there's a little bit of wistfulness about it, right? Like, a lot of people don't talk about what the astronaut training is actually like.
Yeah.
Um, let's try that.
You're just like trying to reset it or something.
Well, I took off some of the packs to see if maybe that will help. Because one of the big problems I was saying, like, not all the packs I had are enabled cross-platform.
Right. I.e.,
So,
me being able to see Halo and you not being able to see Halo.
right. And so I'm readjusting what packs are on to see if I can make that work. Hang on one second. My dog is needing to go out. I'll be
Okay.
back.
Sounds good. I will just continue dropping stuff on the floor and running around Wildlands until the server pops back up like awesome junk. I'm a mess. Wasn't the horse just standing right there? What's up, sheep? I think you're a friendly horse too. Yeah. I think I turned the sound down too low. Audio. That's better. Anyways, how's everyone doing? Minecraft Realms decided to stop working, so that's fun. So I'm playing Wildlands, even though it says Minecraft. It's kind of like Minecraft. Please don't do that. Oh, I'm gonna kill that horse. I'm gonna kill that horse. game. I don't remember how to sprint. Can you sprint in this game? I gotta figure out where I died. I think I died over there. Do I have a map? I do have a map. Ah. What does everything mean, though?
Okay. Let's try this again.
Welcome back. I was riding a horse around in Wildlands. I don't know if you know what Wildlands is, but it's kind of like a survival Minecraft-y kind of thing, but it's like poly patterned instead of blocks.
Okay.
Anyways, I was riding around a horse and approached the edge of a cliff by accident, and the horse reared me off and threw me over the edge of the cliff, and I died.
Nice.
Yeah, it was great. There's a grave on the bottom of this mountain with a smiley face on it. Whoops. Now I have to swim in the water. I think there's a way to sprint, but I don't remember. But I've done a few Wildlands videos here and there. Every time I stop playing it and go back to playing it, I've completely forgotten the controls. So, like Minecraft, you almost never forget how to do things because everything is kind of the same sort of pattern. You know what I mean? But this game, I always forget. Wild horse, but you're a pretty wild horse. I'm pretty sure. Oh, it's on 0. But yeah, it's kind of cool. This game, you can build boats and pirate ships and tame horses. It's kind of like Minecraft in a lot of ways. But
That's neat.
It's too bad Realms turned off for some reason.
What the heck? It almost loaded for a sec. Like, it loaded in and then just went back to the main screen. It didn't even say there was an error.
Yeah, I've got no additional reports of anything happening.
Okay.
But
How long have we been going?
we can probably wrap it up. It's been almost an hour, 48 minutes.
That'll be a good stop. Like, we've gotten a little...
We covered a lot
we've run
of what we were talking about, I think, and I'll
Yeah.
learn something new.
That topic has run its course.
Yeah. But it is interesting, and I do think like I would love to hear how it goes when you try it and see how successful you are, because I mean we're working on doing our backyard, and we've talked about, do we want garden space, do we not want garden space, and maybe we don't need it, maybe we find an alternate solution, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, totally. And I remember maybe that's something else that we can talk about in a podcast episode of Your Backyard, because I know that we've talked about, creating a zero, going back to water, going back to a zero water consumption backyard for you of, creating almost like a playground area, and then the little bit that isn't in the playground area using fake grass.
Yeah, and I still really like that idea. We're actually gonna get some quotes from, like, whatever it's called, some cement guys, because I do want to add a lot of cement, and I know that's gonna be the biggest, probably one of the biggest expenses.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to do that myself. I'd like to have somebody do it. You know what I mean?
I hate cement work.
Yeah,
I don't blame you.
Cement work is dirty, and doing it yourself is...
It's really easy to screw up.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Like, you never appreciate good concrete work. You only know when it's wrong.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people in the state have really bad cement and sidewalk, and time of year they decide to put it in has been bad or whatever it is. There's always something that's causing that to happen. But yeah, so yeah, we are looking at that now. Our neighbors are putting up their fence in the back, so like we're starting to get more of like an idea of how much space we have and things. So but yeah, we can totally talk about that too. I know you really like woodworking and things, and you could probably talk about that all day.
Yeah, and maybe with Podcraft being like a joint effort, I'll have to do some hydroponics and I'll take some pictures so you can upload them to the Instagram so that way people can see
Yeah,
how it goes. So
yeah, for sure. We'll have to do that. Anyway,
yeah,
well, thank you everyone for tuning in or watching us in post. I'm going to try and see about pulling the audio and maybe uploading audio in like a different location, like an iTunes or Google Play or something. I don't know. I think maybe it would be interesting. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. You don't get to see a lot of what we're doing when we're playing, but at least the conversation is there. And I think the conversation is interesting enough to where maybe that would be valuable. So
definitely something we're trying to push is doing the conversation aspect of this. We want this to be something interesting to listen to, or just some good background noise at least.
Right. And then, since we're doing this live usually or not live or whatever, for us, it's kind of fun to play a game while we do it, because then we're doing kind of two things at once, but at the same time, it kind of gives us some other thing to do while someone's talking or whatever. So anyway, so thanks so much. This has been Podcraft episode 2, and tune in next week where we will have another topic to discuss. We'll figure that out later. We'll look at our list and see. If you have anything that you guys want us to talk about, just let us know below in the comments and we will chat. So
yeah, actually that's a great point. If you have something that you'd like to learn about, or if you want somebody else to tell you about, by all means recommend a topic.
Yeah.
I'll happily spend the week researching something.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about its implications or something. That'd be great.
Right.
I'd love that.
Or we can talk about D&D.
Yeah.
Playing Minecraft while talking about D&D. All right. Bye, peeps. Deuces. We'll see you later. All right. Last time it actually cut off correctly, but I'm actually doing local recordings now.